After 4 years in an Italian prison, then an acquittal, Amanda Knox will now face a third trial for the murder of her roommate in Italy. We're joined by WGY legal analyst Paul Harding of Martin, Harding & Mazzotti. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Kelly. Good morning, Chuck.
Hey, Paul.
So to those of us in the United States, this may seem like double jeopardy, but the Italian justice system works vastly differently than ours does.
It does, and that's what we're going to find out, I guess, because clearly here in the U.S., once you're acquitted of a crime, at that point, evidence could come out later. You could actually admit that you did it, and you cannot be tried twice. Double jeopardy, constitutional protection. The question is whether this acquittal that eventually was given to her is that analogous? Is it that analogous to ours, whereby the U.S. will not extradite her back to Italy for the trial?
Well, it almost seems like their trial system, it's almost a series of two trials in one, where you go through the first round and you're either convicted or acquitted, and then you go to the second round to confirm it. And she was convicted the first time around and acquitted the second time. So that's what's being appealed here. But here, if you're acquitted, you're not then tried again. Is there new information? Is there anything else they're using differently, or is it just the same trial all over again?
Yeah, well, they say they have some new information, but again, whether or not, and they're going to try the case, and they're going to, in absentia, they call it, but that probably is going to be without her there. She's in Seattle. She's probably going to stay in Seattle. They're going to try the case without her even in the building, in the country. And then what happens if she is convicted? The question is, will the U.S., which we do have an extradition treaty with Italy, meaning that we can move prisoners back and forth, but what we're not going to do it if we find it violates our Constitution, and therefore did this acquittal, as you say, it's a little different than our acquittal, but they're calling it an acquittal. Is that acquittal analogous with ours, and therefore in violation of our Constitution, and we're never going to send her over there? So even if she is convicted, she'll never do any more jail time.
Speaking with our legal analyst, Paul Harding from Martin, Harding & Mazzotti, could you explain, I guess I'm a little confused on this.
Yeah.
On what basis will the U.S. determine if let's assume she's convicted, on what basis will they determine whether it violates our Constitution?
Well, whether or not that this acquittal, which she has, this acquittal, is directly analogous to ours, because, again, in the U.S., once you're acquitted, you cannot be retried for the case. Mm-hmm. So on its face, it looks very much like that. So the Italian system does allow for an acquittal and then another trial. In the U.S., once you're acquitted, you walk. But as Kelly pointed out, the system is just a little bit different. Mm-hmm. So the question is, would they honor the extradition treaty, which we do have with Italy, if it's a violation of our Constitution? No, they wouldn't. They would say, hey, that rule is so far off of ours, we're going to protect our citizens under our rules, even though the crime happened there. So it's a little dicey. That is the legal question that's being talked about quite a bit in legal circles as to whether or not that's going to happen. The general theme is she will be tried in absentia. She will be tried without being in the courtroom, and that if convicted, that the U.S. is not going to honor the extradition treaty because it does violate her due process.
The other thing that I was looking at is case history here. There was a case of an Italian woman who was convicted here in the U.S., and their extradition agreement was to send her back to Italy to serve her time in her home country, in her home prison, and she was sent to prison and released a short time later. So conceivably, they could do the same thing here and say, well, this is what we did for you, so we're going to do the same thing for us, and send her to a U.S. prison and then release her a month later.
Well, that's one of those things. If they're honoring this extradition treaty, and the theme here is that we are not going to honor an extradition treaty, which has the rules so much different than what, in this case, Miss Knox grew up with. She grew up here. Even though she committed the crime here, we're still protecting our citizenry to some extent. And
yeah,
so
it
almost is a little bit different because we sort of gave her the option of serving her time there. Here, she's never going to get there to serve time.
It just seems like it makes you nervous to travel abroad.
Well, and get involved in just about anything. Yeah, because the facts here, of course, her book is coming out, and and they're going to do a movie on this. So this thing has become sensationalized, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens here.
WGY legal analyst Paul Harding of Martin, Harding & Mazzotti, 1-800-LAW-1010. Paul, thank you so much.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.